This one pains me, but the news is the news and I gotta report it, and I've got to start with a quote. The bottom line is, the release was undercooked. Now, those are the words of Stormgate CEO Tim Morten, and they're honestly kind of damning. You see, Stormgate peaked at 1,000 concurrent players after the full launch, but that was down from 3,000 during early access. And another thing that's down is user reviews. And they've never really been up, because they've never made it far beyond 50% positive. It's quite brutal, and it's a sad state for one of gaming's most prominent ex-Blizzard teams. Like, this was supposed to be the new RTS from ex-Blizzard talent. So the people who knew how to make StarCraft, but were not being allowed to make more StarCraft. But now we've got the CEO painting a rather dire picture of how things went at his own company. One where the company is quite literally running out of steam. And here's his exact words, quote, "Stormgate has not been a commercial success, and though I'm extremely grateful for the players we have, companies run on capital." Now, to some, that statement will seem impossible because, hey, this company raised $40 million in funding. The rough truth is that $40 million will only get you so far. At least if your scope and your ambition is what theirs was. But who the hell are these people anyway? So here's the story. Frost Giant launched in 2020 with some serious pedigree. Tim Morten led production on StarCraft II Legacy of the Void. And I've got to say, that expansion was a banger. And speaking of bangers, Tim Campbell designed the Frozen Throne Warcraft 3 campaign. One of the all-time greats in gaming. So with pedigree like that, their goal of making a worthy successor to those games feels somewhat reasonable. They wanted to make a truly great RTS, and they decided to build that using their own custom tools called Snowplay. And the plan followed StarCraft 2's eventual business model. You see, StarCraft 2 found success going free to play with its multiplayer, with paid campaign episodes, and then co-op stuff going on top of that. And of course, here with Stormgate, they were going to do that with an ongoing live service with skin sales and new heroes. And over 3 years, they raised $35 million from private investors. Then came the Kickstarter. Not to finish the game, mind you. No, the campaign was meant to fund special editions and a pre-launch beta. That led to another $1.2 million in public funding before the launch. And everything really was teed up for success. I saw the hype amongst some creators, and then their Steam Next Fest demo kind of exploded. It was the second most played. So with all that, you'd think they would be teed up for a perfect early access launch. Of course, the reality is they were not. Those who thought the Next Fest success would translate to something huge were actually right. Early access was huge. It was a huge disaster. And one review summed it up perfectly. Quote, "You can take the developer out of Blizzard, but you can't take the Blizzard out of the developer." That must have stung for the team, but it didn't come out of nowhere. You see, audiences thought they pre-ordered everything at launch, but it turns out they hadn't, because there was a new $10 hero voiced by Simu Liu. That there was an extra purchase was a surprise, but then GameStar pointed out another problem. Frost Giant had actually messed up in Kickstarter and didn't even realize it. Their FAQ had promised people, quote, "all Year Zero heroes." This was present on the expanded backer tiers, but someone on the team just deleted that line after Frost Giant had already promised a new paid hero for all backers. So yes, that felt bad. Sentiment soured fast. And unfortunately, the game itself didn't help. People thought the art and design side of things was generic. I think they went stylized in a way that not all of their audience appreciated. Some design elements were found to be underwhelming, as was the writing. There was a short campaign with no offline skirmish mode at launch. That again would have been rough. There was no mod support in day one, and plenty of quality of life issues. Obviously, it was early access. I wouldn't necessarily expect all of those things to be perfect, but it was just that the overall picture didn't feel like something cohesive. And that's the challenge of getting early access right. Yes, it's not the full game, but it still needs to feel like a cohesive thing because people are actually paying money for it. So the early access launch didn't deliver success, but investor Bitcraft led a new funding round to push the team toward their full launch. And April 2025 brought a complete rework of the early access content. Unfortunately, the player numbers did not budge, which again must have been crushingly depressing if you were on that dev team. Of course, the sentiment did not raise up either, and the 1.0 launch that came in August 2025 did not turn things around either. So in short, the public life of this game is not great. And now, as players are debating whether or not the game is even dead, the CEO has been delivering a month-long post-mortem. CEO Tim Morten published 5 blogs on LinkedIn, and they were all about the failure of Stormgate. In every single one, he blames himself for everything that happened. So let's go through these things chronologically. He started by discussing the state of the industry, quite simply saying that audiences demand higher quality than ever before, and it's not just the audiences, it's also investors when it comes to their expectations for the funding that they provide. Then he dove into the RTS genre problem. You see, Stormgate was built on things they learned from StarCraft. And here's what they knew. Campaign players were your biggest audience, but competitive players, well, they were the ones who drove the conversation. Meanwhile, co-op was essential for bringing in new players. The problem? You'd need to hit all 3 modes to truly succeed as an RTS in the modern market. And of course, even StarCraft 2 could not justify a sequel with its revenue, even after it had actually implemented those 3 pillars. Now, Tim Morten says that now he understands that splitting focus was in fact a mistake. They thought they needed to have all of those things to basically make the flywheel work, to get the network effects on their side. But obviously the result is that, quote, every single mode fell short of player expectations. That's obviously quite bad. What about the aesthetic problems though? Well, he basically blames trying to please everyone. There's a little bit of a catch with that. He cites analyst revenue figures for recent successful RTS games, and the third post took aim at a Windows Central article. Now basically that article looked at Steam user reviews showing disappointment across early access, and it suggested that Morten somewhat ignored that players didn't like Stormgate. And he kind of objects pretty strongly here. He agrees that the release was undercooked and that it was his fault. He says he didn't give his team enough time, and he points to StarCraft's 7-year development before Wings of Liberty, or other games like Expedition 33 or Silksong. I mean, like we said in our Silksong video, imagine never having to worry about funding and just the job being to ship the game whenever it's right. That's where the StarCraft team had been. But of course, Tim Morten's job was to worry about the funding, because he wasn't Blizzard Entertainment anymore. He didn't have Warcraft money. And the financial side is where the Kickstarter bit them again. Quote, Stormgate is fully funded to release. That was the campaign promise. According to Morten, Frost Giant meant the game becoming available in early access. By that, not the actual full game. You see, early access is when the monetization would start, and therefore would start keeping the game alive. Hence, $10 heroes at launch. Now obviously, players expected release to mean version 1.0. He also touched on the changed FAQ, saying that a team member's, quote, inexperience led to them to just delete that line. Obviously, players got angry, that created an adversarial relationship with fans, and some then started to forensically analyze Frost Giant for proof of wrongdoing or any trouble, which of course is going to generate more stories that aren't necessarily good ones for the company. And of course now Stormgate is in trouble. Morten was already talking about layoffs to Bloomberg immediately after launch. Following that and these blogs, someone then asked him a fairly direct question. The question is this: is there a team working on the game? And here's his response, quote, some work continues, but the only real path forward is through partnership. Stormgate has not been a commercial success, and though I'm extremely grateful for the players we have, companies run on capital. So yeah, he's going to need a big old injection of money. Now, in the minds of some players, well, this is a confusing situation. And for a fairly simple reason, $40 million. How do you fail when you have $40 million? Okay, first thing to understand, Frost Giant rode the COVID investment wave where, like with many other veteran developers, they just got showered with cash early on. By that I mean $4.7 million in 2020, another $5 million in 2021, and then $25 million in 2022. Now, all that funding was built on a bet. That bet being that the industry thought, it would pay off, right? That's why money was being heaped in. Frost Giant was valued at potentially being worth $150 million when Stormgate released. Again, I wonder what their definition of release is, because if they meant early access, then it certainly ain't worth $150 million. But here's the problem. The industry Stormgate was pitched in, well, it's not the industry Stormgate was released in. And that's not just some trite remark. You see, if investment had have continued at that scale, then Stormgate would have actually had a AAA budget, would have been humongous. And that was actually the game that they started building. But here's the thing with early stage company funding, right? If you want to get a lot more money in, you do need to have quite a big, bold vision that you will credibly pull off. This team obviously had loads of things that would suggest they were credibly the people to do this job. But obviously, investment trends really did change. And I suppose they could have been left with this humongously scoped, very expensive game, but not really the revenue runway to pull it off. I mean, just for a second, think about this. Their plan was a game truly of Blizzard's scale, right? Campaign, co-op, map editor, multiplayer, like loads of community tournament features, and all of that at a high level of graphical fidelity. Because of course, this was meant to be a new modern game in the StarCraft style. Not just that, it was meant to be basically the spiritual successor. That's a hell of a lot of work. That's the type of lofty ambition that can get you a lot of funding. And in the early days, that worked. They were building to a big scale. I mean, just look at the credits. There are 120 plus names who are in direct development roles on this game. Plus, of course, the supporting structures like publishing teams, voice actors, and composers. And that's along with the outsourcing companies covering art, cinematics, and localization. That's a lot. And let's just do some rough maths here. Take an average California game dev wage, say 100 grand. It's a lot of money. I'll say that maybe a third are contractors and they're ultimately costing the company less than the employees or something. But the studio still, you know, covers rent, utilities, and everything else. You could ballpark their annual burn rate at about $10 million. So that would be the cost to run a year of Frost Giant at full pace. Now, again, that's based on loose napkin maths, but it should give you an idea of the scales we're talking about. And that also doesn't factor in marketing costs or anything else. But consider this. Their largest fundraising was $25 million in 2020. Now, when you think about the costs of these things, I mean, your $1.2 million Kickstarter. Assume that Kickstarter doesn't take 10%. Assume you don't have rewards to fulfill, probably taking up another 35%. That's just going to be doing a few people for a year, because making games, especially in that region, is expensive. And during a lot of this development, it truly was expensive. It's a little bit of an anecdote, but I've heard a few little stories of just some people I know over there who back then would be talking about, like, say, losing a candidate whenever they're trying to hire people to offers that were like north of 300K. And certainly, and I don't want to say what role it was because I don't want it to be identifying, but let's just say it wasn't a programming role. And I mean, that just gives you a sense of how expensive that old bubble really got. But hey, to make the best games, you need the best talent, you need to be in the best place. California is that place, and that's the way that things are done. And the way that early stage company funding is done is, you know, you get money, that gives you runway, you make progress, and then you move from, you know, your Series A to your Series B and your Series C, and you do pull in more and more and more money. Now, if Frost Giant was, say, an AI research lab, they'd be doing great right now. Problem is, they're a games company, and that's not really where the money's been going to these days. So the budget that Frost Giant started with was pretty big. And what that did is it ended up being pretty much all that they would end up getting. So no wonder Morten is saying that if they made the game now, they'd have to outsource to outside of America. They'd maybe have to use more generative AI. Basically, they would have had to have done loads of things differently. So they were left in a situation where they were unable to do further large-scale funding raises, and that just meant they had to do a launch with what they had, because cutting features that you've publicly announced doesn't exactly make you look like a company that's valued at $150 million. And at both early access and full launch, well, what happened is you ended up with a Stormgate that did not have enough time in the oven. It was undercooked. The CEO even says that himself. It was a game split across half a dozen different development areas, all because they were trying to hit a target that was set when the games industry was entirely different and where their expectation of future funding was not in line with the timeline that we've ended up in. So where are we left? Well, Tim is not mincing words about the state of the game anymore. He says every single mode fell short of player expectations. That's a massive thing to say, but it's true. I do appreciate honesty. Now, it doesn't change anything for Stormgate as it currently stands. There are remaining developers still working in the game, and they've teased a new update as recently as last week. But here's the truth. Stormgate's problems didn't start at launch. They did not start at early access. It wasn't Simu Liu's fault. You know, he didn't come in and kill the game. No. It wasn't the Kickstarter either. Stormgate's problem started whenever they tried to reach an incredibly difficult goal, a strategy game that would surpass StarCraft 2 on all levels. And they did so expecting the industry would rise up to support them, because you know what? They'd done it before. They made StarCraft 2. But like so many developers in recent years, it didn't pan out. Things changed around them. They didn't end up with the resources and the time they thought they would have, and that meant that some of their public statements ended up not ringing true. And that meant that players are now dealing with a game that has always been undercooked. As for the people left at the company, I think they will try. They will try to do updates. They'll probably try to do what they can. Maybe it's because they haven't worked out their new strategy yet. Maybe it's because they think if they can hold on, that maybe they will find the investor that they need. Someone to come in and rescue them from this situation so the game can finally end up being cooked. Obviously, that is a slim chance. And as far as the ex-Blizzard studios go, this is undoubtedly the one that's had the most issues. I mean, maybe there have been more issues at Bonfire, because I think they've basically been a bonfire for cash for many years. They have finally unveiled something that does actually look pretty neat. There's obviously the other raft of Blizzard Studios, the Dreamhaven raft, and if you want to find out what's going on there, you should watch this video next, because the two games that have came out from under them, really good, but unfortunately, they're now having to lay off staff.